600 feet below the ancient sands of Giza, where no human was ever meant to walk, researchers claim they found something that challenges everything we know about ancient Egypt. In 2025, Italian and Scottish teams released findings so extraordinary that one group hails this as groundbreaking, while skeptics question the very possibility. We're talking about disputed radar anomalies suggesting vertical shafts stretching over 2,100 feet underground, with some researchers interpreting these signals as potential chambers 180 meters below the surface that could predate known Egyptian civilization. But the entire discovery rests on technology that mainstream experts say simply cannot work at such depths. The technology behind the claims. The entire controversy hinges on one critical question. Can satellite-based synthetic aperture radar actually see through thousands of feet of solid rock when every textbook says conventional ground-penetrating radar stops working at 40 feet? The research team claims their advanced SAR technology breaks all the rules, but the physics behind their claims has radar experts scratching their heads. As radar expert Lawrence Conyers notes, GPR penetration in limestone typically maxes out around 30 to 40 feet, not thousands. Standard ground-penetrating radar uses electromagnetic pulses that bounce off buried objects and return to surface receivers. But these signals lose strength rapidly as they penetrate dense materials like limestone bedrock. Yet the Italian and Scottish researchers insist their satellite-mounted synthetic aperture radar penetrates over 4,000 feet into the Giza bedrock with remarkable clarity. Their SAR system operates differently from conventional ground radar. Instead of sending pulses straight down from surface equipment, synthetic aperture radar uses satellites that emit electromagnetic waves at specific frequencies while moving across the target area. The satellite captures reflected signals from multiple angles and positions. Then computer algorithms combine these readings to create detailed subsurface images. They used X-band SAR at approximately 9.6 GHz satellites to collect data, claiming these frequencies maintain signal strength through dense rock formations that would block higher frequency pulses completely. The team reports high confidence based on multiple satellite passes, but offers no published validation for their structural mapping. They arrived at these confidence claims by cross-referencing multiple satellite passes over the same area and comparing signal consistency across different scanning sessions. Areas where signals remained stable across multiple scans received higher confidence ratings, while regions with variable returns were marked as less certain. The researchers emphasize that their confidence applies to the existence of subsurface structures, not necessarily to their precise interpretation of what those structures represent. However, this confidence claim reveals the first major crack in their findings. Independent radar specialists point out that no ground truthing has verified these confidence levels. Ground truthing involves excavating small areas to confirm what radar images actually show underground, a standard practice in archaeological remote sensing. Without physical confirmation, confidence percentages remain purely theoretical calculations based on signal processing algorithms. The research team acknowledges they haven't conducted any excavation to verify their radar interpretations, citing Egyptian government restrictions on digging near the pyramids. The proprietary nature of their data interpretation software adds another layer of controversy. The algorithms that convert raw radar signals into structural images remain closely guarded trade secrets. Independent researchers cannot examine the code that transforms electromagnetic readings into the dramatic underground maps. This lack of transparency violates basic scientific principles that require methods to be reproducible and verifiable by other researchers. When pressed about releasing their algorithms for peer review, the team cites intellectual property concerns and ongoing patent applications. The absence of independent verification becomes more troubling when considering the extraordinary nature of their claims. No other research group has replicated their scanning methods or confirmed their results using different technology. Standard scientific practice requires extraordinary claims to undergo rigorous independent testing before acceptance. The team's reluctance to share their methods or invite collaborative verification suggests either protective secrecy around valuable intellectual property or potential concerns about reproducing their results. Mainstream radar experts have responded with categorical rejection of the deep scanning claims. Professor Lawrence Conyers states flatly that electromagnetic waves cannot maintain signal strength through thousands of feet of dense limestone. The physics simply doesn't support such deep penetration, regardless of frequency or processing algorithms. Conyers explains that electromagnetic energy dissipates exponentially as it passes through solid materials, making deep underground scanning physically impossible with current technology. Other radar specialists point to the fundamental problem of signal-to-noise ratio at extreme depths. Even if some electromagnetic energy reached 4,000 feet underground, the returning signal would be so weak that it would be indistinguishable from background electromagnetic noise. The researchers' claim of detecting structural details at such depths contradicts established physics of electromagnetic wave propagation. No amount of computer processing can extract meaningful data from signals that fall below the noise threshold. The research team responds to these criticisms by arguing that conventional radar experts are thinking within outdated technological limitations. They claim their satellite-based approach and advanced signal processing represent breakthrough innovations that surpass traditional ground-based radar capabilities. However, they provide no published research or peer-reviewed studies that demonstrate these breakthroughs actually work as claimed. Their arguments rely on theoretical possibilities rather than demonstrated technological achievements. The fundamental divide over the technology creates an impossible situation for evaluating their structural claims. If their SAR system cannot actually penetrate thousands of feet underground, then all their detailed maps become meaningless artifacts of flawed data processing. Conversely, if their technology somehow overcomes known physics limitations, it would represent one of the most significant advances in remote sensing technology ever achieved. The researchers have effectively made two extraordinary claims simultaneously: that revolutionary scanning technology exists, and that it has revealed unprecedented archaeological structures. This technological controversy extends beyond simple academic disagreement into questions about scientific integrity and media responsibility. The dramatic structural claims have captured public imagination and generated extensive media coverage. Yet the fundamental technology enabling these claims remains unproven and unverified. Critics argue that releasing such sensational findings without proper peer review and independent verification undermines public trust in legitimate archaeological research. The standoff over scanning technology creates a circular problem that may be impossible to resolve through debate alone. Traditional radar experts insist the claimed deep penetration violates basic physics, while the research team maintains their technology transcends conventional limitations. Without independent testing or verification, both sides remain entrenched in their positions. Yet if we set aside the heated technological debate for a moment and examine what the researchers actually claim to have mapped, the sheer magnitude of their findings becomes staggering. Mapping the impossible structure. According to the team's interpretations of the radar tomograms, 8 massive cylindrical shafts plunge straight down through solid bedrock, each shaft measuring between 33 and 39 feet in diameter. These aren't small exploratory holes, but enormous vertical tunnels that extend 2,100 feet into the earth. To put that in perspective, you could drop the entire Statue of Liberty, including its pedestal, down one of these shafts, and still have over 1,800 feet of empty space below. The researchers describe these shafts as perfectly cylindrical and hollow, positioned strategically beneath each of the 3 main pyramids, plus additional locations across the plateau. Their radar data shows clean, geometric boundaries, with no signs of natural cave formation or erosion patterns. The walls appear smooth and intentionally constructed, maintaining consistent diameter throughout their entire vertical length. Each shaft supposedly contains spiral formations that wind around the interior walls from top to bottom, structures the team interprets as helical staircases or ramps providing access to the depths below. These spiral formations present their own engineering puzzle. The radar signatures suggest continuous helical paths that make multiple complete rotations, as they descend the full 2,100 feet. The pitch and angle of these spirals remain consistent throughout each shaft, indicating precise mathematical planning rather than random construction. The team calculates that walking down one of these spiral pathways would require covering approximately 6,000 feet of actual distance due to the winding route, equivalent to hiking down a mountain trail that somehow fits inside a narrow vertical tube. At the bottom of this shaft array, the researchers claimed their radar detected two enormous rectangular chambers positioned side by side. Each chamber measures approximately 260 feet on every side, creating cube-shaped voids large enough to house a cathedral. The radar signatures show these chambers have flat floors, vertical walls, and right-angled corners that suggest deliberate architectural design. The 8 vertical shafts appear to converge at these chambers, possibly serving as access points or entry corridors into the underground complex. The positioning of these chambers directly beneath the surface pyramid structures raises questions about their relationship to the monuments above. The researchers note that the chambers align with specific geometric patterns related to the pyramid layout, suggesting coordinated planning between surface and underground construction. The chambers themselves show internal structural features that the team interprets as columns, walls, or other architectural elements, dividing the vast spaces into smaller sections. But the mapped structure extends far beyond these initial chambers. The radar data reveals additional formations that plunge another 2,000 feet deeper into the bedrock, bringing the total depth to over 4,000 feet below the surface. This depth exceeds the height of the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, which stands at 2,717 feet. The researchers describe these deeper formations as more complex geometric shapes, including additional rectangular chambers, connecting corridors, and what appear to be multi-level structures stacked vertically within the bedrock. The researchers map a 2-kilometer subsurface anomalies cluster, though critics say it's speculative. The team interprets some reflections as water-filled features at significant depths, creating what they describe as flooded chambers accessed through underwater passages. The radar data shows high-density reflections consistent with stone construction surrounded by low-density areas indicating liquid water. These water-surrounded chambers supposedly maintain their flooded state through unknown underground water sources that have preserved the site for millennia. The team spokesman Nicole Sicolo stated that the discovery could redefine our understanding of the sacred topography of ancient Egypt, providing spatial coordinates for previously unknown and unexplored subterranean structures. The radar signatures throughout the complex show consistent high-density reflections and sharp architectural boundaries that suggest intentional construction rather than natural geological formations. The regularity of shapes, precise measurements, and geometric relationships between different structural elements indicate advanced planning and engineering capabilities. The technical details of the mapped structure reveal construction techniques that challenge our understanding of ancient capabilities. The vertical shafts maintain perfectly consistent diameters across their entire 2,100-foot length, requiring precision drilling or excavation methods that surpass known ancient technology. The spiral staircases follow mathematical curves that would require advanced geometric knowledge to design and construct. The massive chambers carved from solid limestone would demand excavation capabilities comparable to modern mining operations. The researchers note that the 5 shallow chambers near the pyramid base show architectural similarities to known chambers inside the Great Pyramid. Each chamber bears a striking resemblance to the King's Chamber, with layered stone beams forming peaked roofs. This suggests whoever built the underground complex employed architectural principles similar to those used in the Great Pyramid's construction, indicating the same builders or cultural knowledge created both surface and underground structures. The sheer volume of material that would need removal to create these underground spaces presents another engineering challenge. The researchers calculate that excavating the 8 shafts alone would require removing approximately 2.5 million cubic feet of solid limestone bedrock. Adding the massive chambers and connecting passages would increase this figure to over 15 million cubic feet of excavated material. This volume of removed stone would create a pile larger than many of the smaller pyramids at Giza, Yet no evidence exists of where such enormous quantities of excavated material were deposited. The construction methods required for such deep excavation raise fundamental questions about ancient capabilities. Digging 4,000 feet into solid bedrock would require sophisticated ventilation systems to provide fresh air to workers, drainage systems to remove groundwater, and lifting mechanisms to transport excavated material to the surface. The precision required for the spiral staircases and geometric chambers would demand advanced surveying and construction techniques that exceed documented ancient Egyptian capabilities. Some researchers speculate that the cylindrical wells could have functioned as conduits for energy or sound waves, while the cubic chambers might have served as energy storage or stabilization units. The mathematical precision of the spiral formations and the geometric relationships between different structural elements suggest the complex was designed according to specific technical requirements rather than simple architectural preferences. The implications of these structural claims extend beyond simple archaeological discovery into questions about human technological development. If ancient builders possessed the capability to create such massive underground complexes, their engineering knowledge would rival or exceed many modern construction techniques. Yet the most shocking aspect of this discovery isn't the engineering marvel itself, but when the research team claims it was built. The dating controversy. The team's estimates controversially date these features far earlier than known Egyptian structures, making claims that don't just challenge mainstream archaeology, but completely obliterate our understanding of human civilization. To grasp the magnitude of this assertion, consider that such ancient dating would place these structures in the Upper Paleolithic period, when humans were supposedly living in caves, hunting mammoths, and creating the first crude cave paintings. The oldest known human-made structures on Earth, the stone circles at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, date back only 12,000 years. The researchers are claiming these Giza structures predate Göbekli Tepe by tens of thousands of years. Current archaeological records from 2025 show that during such ancient periods, human societies existed as small nomadic groups of hunter-gatherers. These people possessed stone tools, basic fire-making capabilities, and rudimentary shelter construction skills. They had no cities, no writing systems, no agriculture, and no permanent settlements. The idea that such societies could engineer massive underground complexes with precision-carved spiral staircases and geometrically perfect chambers contradicts everything we know about human development during this period. The technological gap between cave-dwelling hunter-gatherers and the builders of these supposed structures would be equivalent to jumping from the Stone Age directly to the Industrial Revolution. The researchers base their extraordinary dating on interpretations of ancient Egyptian texts, rather than conventional archaeological dating methods. They link to Chapter 149 of the Book of the Dead, which allegorically describes 14 underworld dwellings. Mainstream scholars see this as metaphor rather than literal guide. The team also references the Turin King List, which records rulers described as gods and demigods who supposedly governed Egypt before the first dynasties. The team argues these texts represent genuine historical memory passed down through generations, suggesting the structures were built by a pre-dynastic civilization that possessed advanced engineering capabilities. However, the researchers haven't revealed their complete dating methodology. They mention radar analysis of structural features and comparison with geological formations, but they provide no radiocarbon dating, no stratigraphic analysis, and no physical samples that could verify their age claims. Traditional archaeological dating relies on analyzing organic materials found within or near structures, examining tool marks and construction techniques, and studying the geological context of discoveries. The team's reluctance to share detailed dating methods raises questions about whether their timeline comes from actual scientific analysis or speculative interpretation of ancient texts. If these dating claims were somehow accurate, the implications for human history would be staggering. We would need to accept that an advanced civilization existed during the last ice age, possessed engineering capabilities that wouldn't be seen again for tens of thousands of years, and somehow vanished without leaving any other trace in the archaeological record. This civilization would have needed to develop mathematics, engineering, logistics, and construction techniques sophisticated enough to excavate millions of cubic feet of bedrock and create precision-carved architectural features. They would have accomplished this during a period when mainstream archaeology insists humans were struggling to survive in harsh glacial conditions. The problem becomes even more complex when considering the complete absence of any civilization capable of such construction during such ancient periods. Archaeological evidence from this time shows human populations scattered across continents in small groups, living in temporary shelters and using simple stone tools. No evidence exists of the large-scale social organization, specialized labor force, or technological knowledge required for massive construction projects. Building the claimed underground complex would require thousands of workers, sophisticated planning, advanced tool-making capabilities, and logistical systems for moving materials and coordinating construction efforts. None of these elements appear in the archaeological record for such ancient time periods. The scientific basis for such extraordinary age claims faces intense scrutiny from mainstream archaeologists. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the research team has provided neither physical samples nor peer-reviewed studies supporting their dating. Archaeological science demands rigorous verification through multiple independent dating methods, physical excavation, and analysis of construction materials. The team's reliance on ancient texts and radar interpretations falls far short of the evidence standards required for such revolutionary claims about human history. Mainstream archaeological consensus on human development during such ancient periods paints a very different picture than what the researchers suggest. During these times, humans were adapting to harsh glacial conditions, developing improved hunting techniques, and creating the first artistic expressions through cave paintings and carved figurines. The most advanced human achievements of this era include sophisticated stone tool production, basic jewelry making, and temporary shelter construction. These capabilities remain thousands of years away from the engineering knowledge required for massive underground construction projects. The dating controversy reveals a fundamental conflict between evidence-based archaeology and speculative interpretation of ancient texts. Mainstream archaeologists treat mythological texts as cultural documents that reflect beliefs and storytelling traditions rather than historical records. The researchers' approach of treating the Book of the Dead and Turin King list as literal historical accounts violates standard archaeological methodology. These texts were written thousands of years after the supposed construction of the underground structures, making them unreliable sources for dating physical archaeological features. Critics reject literal use of such myths for dating architectural features, pointing out that the extraordinary dating serves the researchers' narrative about lost civilizations while ignoring the fundamental problem of archaeological evidence. The dating allows them to place the structures in a prehistoric period where limited evidence exists to contradict their claims. This strategy avoids the problem of explaining how such advanced construction could occur during well-documented historical periods when human capabilities were clearly insufficient for such projects. The staggering implications of verified ancient construction would force a complete restructuring of human developmental timelines. Archaeological textbooks would require rewriting. University courses would need fundamental revision, and our understanding of human technological progression would collapse. Whether such a paradigm shift could occur based on radar data and ancient text interpretations remains the central question dividing believers and skeptics in this extraordinary controversy. Yet the 2025 claims weren't made in complete isolation. For decades, researchers have detected hints that something unusual lies hidden beneath the Giza Plateau, creating a pattern of discoveries that either supports previous or contradicts these latest extraordinary assertions. The Stanford Research Institute collaboration with Ain Shams University in Cairo during the late 1970s marked the first systematic attempt to peer beneath Giza using modern technology. Their ground-penetrating radar survey revealed the presence of voids and suggested artificial chambers located beneath the Pyramid of Khafre, the second largest pyramid on the plateau. The Stanford team detected clear anomalies that indicated hollow spaces within the solid limestone bedrock, spaces that appeared too regular and geometrically consistent to represent natural cave formations. Their radar signatures showed distinct boundaries and organized patterns that suggested intentional construction rather than random geological voids. The Stanford findings generated considerable excitement among archaeologists who recognized the potential significance of hidden chambers beneath one of the world's most studied monuments. The radar data indicated these voids extended deeper than previously known chambers and possessed architectural features that didn't match any documented spaces within or around the pyramids. The researchers documented their findings in technical reports that described specific locations, approximate sizes, and structural characteristics of the detected anomalies. These reports provided the first scientific evidence that significant unknown features existed beneath the Giza Plateau. However, the Stanford discoveries were never fully investigated through physical excavation or more detailed scanning. The Egyptian government restricted access to the areas where the voids were detected, citing concerns about potential damage to the pyramid structures and surrounding archaeological sites. Political tensions and bureaucratic complications prevented follow-up research that could have confirmed or disproven the radar findings. The Stanford team's work remained incomplete, leaving fundamental questions unanswered about the nature and significance of their detected voids. British researcher Andrew Collins brought new attention to underground features at Giza through his 2008 investigation of the Tomb of Birds, a lesser-known burial site carved into the north cliff of the plateau. Beyond the traditional tomb chambers, with their ancient engravings and burial artifacts, Collins discovered a narrow crawl space that led into a natural cave system extending southward under the plateau. These passages, which became known as Collins's Caves, revealed that natural underground networks existed beneath Giza on a much larger scale than previously recognized. The cave system Collins documented stretched hundreds of feet southward from the Tomb of Birds toward the central pyramid complex. The passages maintained consistent dimensions and showed signs of ancient modification, suggesting they had been enlarged or altered by human activity at some point in their history. Collins found evidence that these caves had been used during ancient times, possibly as storage areas, ritual spaces, or access routes to other underground locations. The caves contained pottery fragments, tool marks, and other artifacts that indicated regular human presence over extended periods. The direction of Collins's cave system proved particularly intriguing because the passages extended toward the Pyramid of Khafre, the same structure where Stanford researchers had detected voids decades earlier. This alignment suggested possible connections between the natural cave network and the artificial chambers detected by radar. Collins proposed that the cave system might represent the uppermost levels of a more extensive underground complex that included both natural formations and constructed chambers. The 2007 TRACE-RX satellite mission added another piece to the underground Giza puzzle. The satellite's advanced imaging systems detected subsurface voids in the same general area where Collins had found his cave system, and where Stanford researchers had identified radar anomalies beneath the second pyramid. The satellite data used different detection methods than ground-based radar, but the results showed consistent patterns of underground hollow spaces in specific locations across the plateau. The alignment of findings from multiple decades and different technologies suggested that significant underground features definitely existed beneath Giza. More recently, a 2023 Japanese-led radar and electrical resistivity survey provided additional evidence of subsurface features at Giza. This legitimate scientific investigation discovered an L-shaped structure and deeper anomaly near the mastabas, though these findings remained within 10 meters of the surface rather than extending to extreme depths. The Japanese team's work demonstrates that proper subsurface surveys at Giza continue to uncover smaller features using established archaeological methods, contrasting sharply with claims of massive structures extending 2 kilometers underground. Some researchers now argue that these decades of discoveries represent pieces of the same underground puzzle that the 2025 Italian and Scottish team claims to have solved completely. They propose that Collins's caves represent the natural upper levels of an extensive underground network that includes the artificial chambers detected by Stanford radar and confirmed by satellite imagery. According to this interpretation, earlier researchers were detecting different aspects of the same massive underground complex that the current team has mapped in its entirety using advanced scanning technology. However, critics point out that connecting these separate discoveries into a unified underground complex requires significant speculation beyond what the actual evidence supports. The Stanford voids were detected beneath the Pyramid of Khafre. Collins's caves extend from a north cliff, and satellite anomalies cover broad areas across the plateau. These findings could represent completely separate underground features rather than interconnected components of a single massive structure. The tendency to connect unrelated underground discoveries into grand theories about lost civilizations represents exactly the kind of speculative thinking that mainstream archaeologists criticize. The pattern of incomplete investigations also raises questions about whether earlier researchers actually discovered significant archaeological features or simply detected mundane geological formations that were interpreted as mysterious chambers. Without physical excavation or more detailed analysis, the true nature of these underground anomalies remains unknown. The excitement generated by radar signatures and satellite data can create expectations that exceed what the actual evidence supports. These decades of underground discoveries at Giza create either compelling support for extraordinary claims about hidden structures or demonstrate how persistent speculation can transform routine geological features into archaeological mysteries. The current controversy represents the culmination of 50 years of hints, theories, and incomplete investigations that have never been definitively resolved through proper excavation and analysis. Yet the researchers behind the 2025 claims insist their findings represent more than random underground structures, arguing instead that their discoveries align perfectly with ancient records that have been hiding in plain sight for millennia. Ancient texts and lost civilizations. The researchers don't just claim their radar detected random underground structures. They argue these formations match descriptions found in ancient Egyptian religious texts with startling precision. The team connects their findings directly to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld that represented far more than simple death mythology. In Egyptian cosmology, the Duat existed as a real realm beneath the earth where souls faced judgment and gods like Osiris maintained their eternal dominion. Ancient Egyptians believed this underworld possessed physical locations, actual chambers and passages that souls would traverse during their journey to the afterlife. They argue Giza means mouth of passages in Egyptian, but specialists note this translation is debated. The researchers claim this translation implies that ancient Egyptians recognized the plateau as a gateway to subterranean realms long before modern researchers began detecting underground anomalies. According to their interpretation, the mapped structures represent the physical manifestation of what ancient texts described as spiritual geography, transforming religious mythology into archaeological reality. Chapter 149 of the Book of the Dead provides the most specific textual evidence for the team's interpretations. This chapter describes 14 divine dwellings that souls must navigate during their afterlife journey, each dwelling possessing distinct characteristics and challenges. Traditional Egyptology treats these dwellings as symbolic representations of spiritual trials, but the researchers propose a radically different interpretation. They suggest these 14 dwellings describe actual physical locations that exist beneath Giza, chambers and passages that served both spiritual and practical functions in ancient Egyptian society. The researchers count their detected underground chambers and claim the numbers align with the 14 divine dwellings described in Chapter 149. They argue that ancient texts preserved detailed knowledge about real underground structures that existed thousands of years before the pyramids were built. According to this interpretation, the Book of the Dead functions as both religious guide and architectural blueprint, providing directions to physical locations that souls and living priests could actually visit during religious ceremonies. The Turin King list adds another layer of controversial evidence to their claims, though mainstream Egyptologists treat these lists as religious myth, not history. The research team treats the document as genuine historical memory passed down through generations of Egyptian priests and scribes. They argue that these mythological rulers possessed advanced technological knowledge that enabled them to construct the massive underground complexes their radar has detected. The extraordinary longevity attributed to these rulers could represent collective memory of a civilization that existed for millennia before dynastic Egypt emerged. This interpretation requires accepting that ancient Egyptian texts preserve accurate historical information about events that occurred tens of thousands of years ago. The researchers argue that oral traditions and priestly records maintain detailed knowledge about prehistoric civilizations across vast time periods. They suggest that Egyptian priests possessed sophisticated systems for preserving and transmitting historical information that modern scholars have consistently underestimated. The religious framework of Egyptian texts may have provided the cultural mechanism for preserving technical knowledge about ancient engineering projects. The team connects their textual interpretations to global flood myths and cataclysm stories found across different cultures worldwide. They argue that similar stories about advanced civilizations destroyed by catastrophic events appear in traditions from Mesopotamia, South America, and other regions separated by thousands of miles and years. These parallel narratives suggest that cultural memories of actual historical events spread across ancient civilizations through migration, trade, or shared experiences of global catastrophes. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis provides their preferred explanation for how advanced prehistoric civilizations could have disappeared while leaving only fragmented cultural memories. This theory proposes that an asteroid strike around 12,800 years ago triggered global climate chaos, massive flooding, and environmental devastation that destroyed advanced societies across multiple continents. The researchers suggest that the underground structures at Giza represent remnants of a civilization that was destroyed during this cataclysmic period, explaining why no other evidence of such advanced prehistoric societies appears in the archaeological record. This catastrophic explanation addresses the fundamental problem of why no other evidence exists for advanced prehistoric civilizations. The researchers argue that the absence of supporting archaeological evidence results from the complete destruction of surface civilizations during the Younger Dryas event. Only the most substantial constructions, like massive underground complexes carved into bedrock, would have survived such catastrophic events. The flooding associated with rapid ice melting could have filled underground chambers with water, preserving them in the flooded state their radar supposedly detects today. The question of whether ancient texts can serve as legitimate archaeological evidence creates a fundamental divide between the researchers and mainstream Egyptology. Traditional archaeological methodology requires physical evidence to support historical claims, treating ancient texts as cultural documents that reflect beliefs and storytelling traditions rather than factual historical records. Ancient texts provide valuable information about how past societies understood their world, but they cannot substitute for physical evidence when making claims about actual historical events or structures. Mainstream Egyptology firmly rejects literal interpretations of mythological texts, like the Book of the Dead and Turin King list. These texts were composed thousands of years after the supposed events they describe, making them unreliable sources for information about prehistoric civilizations. The symbolic language, religious themes, and supernatural elements in these texts indicate their primary function as spiritual guides rather than historical chronicles. Scholars argue that treating mythological texts as literal historical records violates basic principles of evidence-based historical research. The controversy over ancient texts reveals a fundamental conflict between evidence-based archaeology and speculative historical interpretation. The researchers' approach of treating religious texts as literal historical records requires accepting extraordinary claims without the extraordinary evidence that scientific methodology demands. Their interpretation transforms mythology into history while ignoring the cultural and religious contexts that shaped these ancient documents. This methodological divide has created exactly the kind of scientific controversy that draws immediate attention from the archaeological establishment. The scientific establishment strikes back. Leading experts across multiple continents launched coordinated attacks against the research methods, findings, and credibility of the entire project. The scientific community's response revealed deep concerns about maintaining rigorous standards in archaeology, but it also exposed institutional resistance to claims that challenge established historical narratives. Professor Lawrence Conyers from the University of Denver emerged as the most vocal technical critic of the deep radar penetration claims. Conyers, who has spent decades using ground-penetrating radar in archaeological contexts, stated flatly that the idea of radar detecting structures at such depths was not feasible. He explained that radar waves attenuate or lose strength while underground, making it difficult to achieve the claimed depth of detection. According to Conyers, electromagnetic waves simply cannot maintain signal strength through thousands of feet of dense limestone bedrock, regardless of the frequency used or the processing algorithms applied to the data. Conyers acknowledged that ancient civilizations often built structures over natural caves or geological features that held ceremonial significance. He conceded that there could be minor structures beneath Giza, but argued that they would not constitute a 4,000-foot deep city. This perspective highlighted the central divide between critics and supporters. The establishment wasn't rejecting the possibility of underground features entirely, but they were challenging the extraordinary scale, depth, and methods used to claim their existence. Conyers emphasized that radar technology had well-documented limitations that couldn't be overcome through wishful thinking or advanced data processing. The technical criticism extended beyond simple penetration depth to fundamental questions about signal interpretation. Conyers and other radar experts pointed out that even if weak signals somehow returned from extreme depths, distinguishing between natural geological features and artificial structures would be nearly impossible. The researchers' confident interpretations of spiral staircases and geometric chambers required signal clarity that physics simply doesn't support at such depths. The critics argued that the team was essentially claiming to see details that were physically impossible to detect with any known radar technology. Scholars like Hawass and Abdul Basir call the work unscientific and warn against pseudoscience. Zahi Hawass, the former Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, asserted that the techniques used by the researchers were not approved and not validated, claiming the work was an attempt to undermine the grandeur of ancient Egyptian civilization. His strong condemnation reflected the concerns of Egyptian authorities about unapproved research methods and the potential for sensationalism to overshadow rigorous archaeological practices. Hawass's criticism carried particular weight because of his decades of experience managing archaeological research at Giza. He had overseen numerous legitimate discoveries and understood the proper protocols for conducting scientific research at Egypt's most sensitive archaeological sites. His dismissal of the underground city claims suggested that the research team had failed to follow established procedures for obtaining permission, conducting peer review, and coordinating with Egyptian authorities. The absence of official approval raised questions about whether the team had actually conducted any research at Giza or simply analyzed existing data from their home institutions. Hussein Abdul Basir, the Director General of the Giza Pyramids area, joined the criticism by emphasizing that extraordinary claims in archaeology require extraordinary evidence. He pointed out that the research team had bypassed essential steps, including peer-reviewed studies, independent replication, and formal excavation. Abdul Basir argued that physical samples and verifiable data were necessary to support such revolutionary claims about ancient Egyptian civilization. His criticism underscored the importance of rigorous scientific methodology in validating archaeological discoveries. The background of researcher Corrado Malanga became a point of contention when critics noted his history of publishing work on UFOs and extraterrestrial encounters. This association led to concerns that the research might be influenced by fringe theories, though critics focused primarily on methodological issues rather than dismissing all his work outright. The UFO connection provided additional ammunition for those questioning the project's scientific credibility. The core criticism from mainstream archaeologists centered on the fundamental absence of peer review and physical excavation to support the claims. The scientific establishment emphasized that archaeology requires physical evidence, peer review, and repeatable results before accepting extraordinary claims. The research team had released their findings through media channels without subjecting their work to the rigorous evaluation process that legitimate scientific discoveries must undergo. This bypass of standard protocols raised serious questions about the validity of their methods and conclusions. The establishment's pushback focused on maintaining the centuries of painstaking work and established methodologies that underpin archaeological science. Critics argued that accepting extraordinary claims without proper evidence would undermine the credibility of the entire discipline. The deeper and bolder the claim, the stronger the proof must be. The release of extraordinary findings through media channels without excavation, publication, or the support of verified technology raised alarm bells among scholars who had dedicated their careers to careful, methodical archaeological research. The controversy revealed deeper institutional concerns about the potential for sensationalism to threaten rigorous archaeology. The scientific establishment feared that extraordinary claims, especially those presented through media channels without proper scientific validation, could damage public trust in legitimate archaeological research. The establishment's apprehension wasn't simply about being wrong, but about the prospect of centuries of careful work being dismissed as mere speculation or reduced to the same level as conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. The requirements for extraordinary claims in archaeological science became a central focus of the criticism. Established protocols demand physical evidence, independent verification, and peer review before accepting revolutionary discoveries. The underground city claims violated these standards by relying solely on unverified radar data and speculative interpretations of ancient texts. Critics argued that the research team had confused speculation with science, presenting theoretical possibilities as established facts without providing the evidence necessary to support such extraordinary conclusions. Yet beneath all the institutional criticism and methodological disputes lies a fundamental question that no amount of academic debate, the technology debate, through argument alone. The entire controversy boils down to a simple question of physics. Can electromagnetic waves maintain enough strength to detect structural details thousands of feet underground? Conventional ground-penetrating radar hits a hard wall at 30 to 40 feet below the surface, a limitation that has defined archaeological surveying for decades. This depth restriction isn't arbitrary or based on outdated equipment. It stems from fundamental physics, governing how electromagnetic waves behave when passing through dense materials like limestone bedrock. Ground-penetrating radar operates by sending electromagnetic pulses into the ground and measuring the reflections that bounce back from buried objects or geological features. These pulses lose energy as they travel through solid materials, a process called attenuation. The denser the material, the faster the energy dissipates. Limestone bedrock, which forms the foundation of the Giza Plateau, represents one of the most challenging materials for radar penetration. The electromagnetic waves encounter resistance at every foot of depth, gradually weakening until the returning signals become too faint to distinguish from background electromagnetic noise. Professor Lawrence Conyers from the University of Denver, who has spent decades applying ground-penetrating radar to archaeological sites, explains the fundamental limitation with stark clarity. Radar waves gradually attenuate in the ground, Conyers states. It is impossible to reach such a depth with this technique. His assessment reflects the consensus among radar experts that electromagnetic waves attenuate exponentially in rock, making GPR or SAR detection beyond 30 to 40 feet physically implausible regardless of the frequency used or the power of the transmitting equipment. The 30 to 40 foot limitation isn't just theoretical. It represents the practical boundary where radar signals become too weak to provide useful information about subsurface features. Even under optimal conditions with dry soil and minimal interference, conventional ground-penetrating radar struggles to penetrate beyond 100 feet. The dense limestone at Giza presents far more challenging conditions than optimal scenarios, making deep penetration claims even more problematic from a physics perspective. The Italian and Scottish research team claims their satellite-based synthetic aperture radar technology overcomes these fundamental limitations through advanced signal processing and different operational principles. Their SAR system employs high-frequency electromagnetic pulses transmitted from satellites rather than ground-based equipment. The team argues that satellite-based transmission provides superior penetration capabilities compared to conventional ground-penetrating radar, potentially reaching depths of hundreds or thousands of feet. The researchers' confidence in their readings exceeds 85%, suggesting they believe their structural mapping accurately represents real underground features. This confidence level supposedly stems from their successful mapping of known structures within the Tomb of Osiris, which they claim proves their methods work accurately. The team presents this validation as evidence that their technology can reliably detect and map underground features at the depths they claim. However, the researchers' technical explanations reveal methodology that differs significantly from conventional radar approaches. Rather than relying on direct wave penetration through solid rock, their system analyzes micro-vibrations of the pyramid structures and surrounding bedrock. These micromovements are induced by ambient seismic waves that constantly affect all geological formations. The SAR satellites detect these tiny movements as subtle phase shifts or Doppler frequency shifts in the radar echoes reflected from the pyramid surfaces. This phononic approach represents a fundamental departure from conventional radar methodology. Instead of attempting to penetrate solid rock directly, the system analyzes how seismic vibrations propagate through different materials and structures. The researchers argue that this technique can detect hollow spaces, density variations, and architectural features without requiring electromagnetic waves to travel through thousands of feet of solid limestone. The absence of independent verification represents perhaps the most serious weakness in the team's technical claims. No other research group has replicated their scanning methods or confirmed their results using different technology. Standard scientific practice requires extraordinary claims to undergo rigorous independent testing before acceptance. The research team's failure to invite collaborative verification or allow independent testing of their methods suggests either protective secrecy around valuable intellectual property or concerns about reproducing their results. Comparing the claimed SAR technology to verified deep scanning, technologies used in other fields reveal significant discrepancies. Mining companies use sophisticated ground-penetrating methods to locate ore deposits and map underground geology. But these techniques remain limited by the same physics constraints that affect archaeological radar. Seismic surveys used in oil exploration can detect deep geological features, but they require explosive charges or massive vibrating equipment to generate the energy needed for deep penetration. The passive satellite-based approach claimed by the research team has no equivalent in verified deep scanning applications. The fundamental question remains whether the technology claims are physically possible given our current understanding of electromagnetic wave propagation. The team's phononic approach might theoretically detect some subsurface features through vibration analysis, but the level of detail they claim to achieve appears to exceed what such methods could realistically produce. Their confident interpretations of spiral staircases, geometric chambers, and architectural details require signal clarity that seems impossible to achieve through microvibration analysis. Critics point out that even if the SAR system can detect some subsurface anomalies, distinguishing between natural geological features and artificial structures would be extremely difficult. The researchers' detailed interpretations of their data require assumptions about signal characteristics that haven't been verified through independent testing or physical excavation. The gap between what their technology might theoretically detect and what they claim to have discovered represents a critical weakness in their arguments. The technology debate reveals how advanced claims about breakthrough capabilities can generate archaeological excitement while simultaneously exposing vulnerabilities in scientific validation processes. The research team has effectively made two extraordinary claims. that revolutionary deep scanning technology exists, and that it has revealed unprecedented archaeological structures. Both claims require extraordinary evidence, yet the proprietary nature of their methods and the absence of independent verification leave fundamental questions unanswered about whether their technology actually works as claimed. This technological stalemate has created an impossible situation where neither side can definitively prove their position through argument alone. The physics experts insist the claimed penetration violates known limitations, while the research team maintains their breakthrough technology transcends conventional constraints. Yet amid all this heated debate about radar capabilities and signal processing, both sides seem reluctant to discuss the most obvious solution to their dispute: what excavation would reveal. A straightforward test drilling program could resolve this entire dispute within months. Proper verification would require core samples at 180-meter depth, where the team claims to have detected the first major chambers. A single exploratory hole drilled at the precise coordinates specified in their radar maps would encounter either the hollow spaces they describe or solid limestone bedrock with no unusual features. The physical evidence would be incontrovertible, silencing skeptics if chambers exist or exposing the claims as misinterpreted data if they don't. The evidence that excavation would uncover extends far beyond simple presence or absence of hollow spaces. Construction techniques revealed through physical examination would provide crucial information about the builder's capabilities and time period. Tool marks on chamber walls would indicate the methods used to carve through solid bedrock. Construction materials, architectural joints, and finishing techniques would reveal the level of engineering sophistication involved in creating these spaces. Any artifacts found within the chambers would provide dating evidence and cultural context for understanding who built these structures and when. Egyptian conservation rules make such drilling highly unlikely given the UNESCO World Heritage Site restrictions and the complex permit process involving multiple government agencies. The authorities remain particularly cautious about work that could affect pyramid stability or create unauthorized access points. The research team's media-first approach without proper permits has likely complicated any future excavation approval. Professional drilling equipment capable of reaching 600 feet through limestone bedrock would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to operate, with daily expenses reaching tens of thousands. The extended timeline for proper archaeological documentation could require years and cost millions of dollars, resources that few institutions possess for testing claims most experts consider dubious. The research team's apparent reluctance to propose limited test excavations raises questions about their confidence in their own findings. If their radar data clearly shows massive chambers at specific coordinates, they should be eager to prove their claims through physical verification. A single successful test excavation would vindicate their methods and establish their credibility within the archaeological community. Their avoidance of excavation proposals suggests either uncertainty about their findings or recognition that physical testing might disprove their claims. Previous excavation attempts at Giza demonstrate the challenges facing researchers who seek to explore underground features. The 1998 robot exploration of the Queen's Chamber shaft generated significant controversy when it revealed a door with metal handles, leading to public speculation about hidden chambers. The subsequent investigation using fiber optic cameras showed only a small chamber beyond the door, disappointing those who expected major discoveries. This pattern of promising findings, followed by mundane results, has made Egyptian authorities more cautious about permitting speculative excavation work. The handling of the 2017 Cosmic Ray Scanning Project that detected voids within the Great Pyramid illustrates the proper protocols for investigating anomalous findings. The international team published their results in peer-reviewed journals, worked closely with Egyptian authorities, and proposed careful follow-up investigations using multiple verification methods. Their methodical approach contrasts sharply with the underground city researchers' media-first strategy and absence of official collaboration. The specific evidence that would satisfy scientific skeptics includes core samples from the claimed chamber locations, photographs of carved surfaces or architectural features, and artifacts that could provide dating and cultural context. Physical evidence of construction techniques, tool marks, or building materials would demonstrate human activity at the claimed depths. Water samples from the supposed flooded chambers could provide chemical analysis indicating their origin and history. Most importantly, the discovery of actual hollow spaces at the precise coordinates specified by the research team would validate their scanning methods. The political and cultural sensitivities surrounding excavation at Giza extend beyond simple permit requirements. The pyramids represent national symbols for Egypt and sacred sites within Islamic culture. Any excavation work that appears to threaten these monuments or seems motivated by sensationalism rather than legitimate scientific inquiry faces strong cultural resistance. The research team's media-first approach to releasing their findings has likely increased suspicion about their motives and reduced the likelihood of receiving excavation permits. The reality remains that without excavation, this debate may never reach resolution. The research team can continue claiming their radar detected massive underground structures, while critics maintain that physics makes such deep scanning impossible. The absence of physical evidence allows both sides to maintain their positions indefinitely, with believers pointing to ancient texts and radar images, while skeptics demand proper scientific validation. Yet the controversy has reached a point where the implications of either outcome demand serious consideration. The archaeological establishment has staked its reputation on dismissing these claims as physically impossible, while the research team has made assertions so extraordinary that verification would fundamentally alter our understanding of human history. The stakes have grown beyond simple academic disagreement into questions that could reshape everything we think we know about ancient civilizations and human technological development. The implications, if true. Consider what would happen if excavation crews broke through into those claimed chambers tomorrow morning. The implications would extend far beyond simple archaeological discovery into three fundamental areas that would reshape our understanding of human civilization. The technological anachronism would demolish our current timeline of human achievement. Building vertical shafts that extend 2,100 feet through solid limestone bedrock demands engineering knowledge that supposedly didn't exist until the industrial age. The precision required for spiral staircases carved into rock faces would need advanced surveying techniques, mathematical calculations, and construction methods that exceed what we attribute to Stone Age societies. The geometric chambers, with their perfect right angles and consistent measurements, would require tools and planning systems that challenge everything we know about prehistoric human capabilities. These builders would have needed to solve problems that modern engineers still find challenging. Ventilation systems would be essential for workers laboring thousands of feet underground. Water management would be crucial for preventing flooding during construction. Material removal would require sophisticated lifting mechanisms to transport millions of cubic feet of excavated limestone to the surface. The coordination of such a massive project would demand social organization, specialized labor forces, and resource management systems that supposedly didn't develop until thousands of years later. The verification of 38,000-year-old construction would force a complete rewriting of human developmental timelines. The established narrative of gradual progression from hunter-gatherers to agricultural societies to urban civilizations would require replacement with a model that includes advanced prehistoric societies, followed by collapse and gradual recovery. The concept of linear technological progress would give way to cycles of advancement and regression, with modern civilization representing a return to capabilities that existed tens of thousands of years ago rather than unprecedented human achievement. Ancient Egyptian civilization would need complete reinterpretation within this new framework. The pyramids would transform from monuments built by emerging agricultural societies into structures created by inheritors of far more ancient knowledge. The precision of pyramid construction, the advanced mathematical principles embedded in their design, and the sophisticated engineering techniques would make sense as products of inherited wisdom rather than sudden innovations. The absence of developmental stages in Egyptian architecture would gain explanation through connection to prehistoric engineering traditions. The discovery would force connections to other controversial archaeological sites worldwide that mainstream science has consistently dismissed or ignored. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, with its massive stone circles and advanced carving techniques, would suddenly fit into a broader pattern of advanced prehistoric construction. The underwater structures off the coast of Japan, the massive stone walls in South America, and the precision-cut blocks at sites like Pumapunku would gain new credibility as evidence of widespread advanced civilizations. The isolated anomalies that archaeologists have struggled to explain would transform into components of a global network of sophisticated prehistoric societies. The institutional upheaval would create a crisis requiring fundamental restructuring of established archaeological methodologies and academic frameworks. University curricula would need complete revision to incorporate evidence of advanced prehistoric civilizations. Archaeological training would require expansion to include technologies and construction techniques currently considered beyond ancient capabilities. The peer review process would need modification to prevent institutional bias from blocking revolutionary discoveries. The discipline would need to acknowledge that conservative approaches to evidence evaluation had missed or suppressed crucial information about human development. Mainstream archaeology would face questions about its resistance to paradigm-shifting discoveries. The validation of such extraordinary claims would lend credibility to numerous fringe archaeological theories that mainstream science has rejected. The idea that ancient texts preserve genuine historical memories rather than mythology would gain support. Theories about catastrophic events that destroyed advanced civilizations would require serious consideration. Alternative interpretations of archaeological evidence that have been dismissed as speculation would need re-evaluation. The cultural implications would extend far beyond academic archaeology. Ancient Egyptian religious texts would gain new significance as potential historical documents rather than pure mythology. The descriptions of underground realms in the Book of the Dead would require interpretation as geographical knowledge rather than spiritual symbolism. The Turin King lists accounts of god-kings ruling for thousands of years would need consideration as compressed historical memory rather than fabricated mythology. The careful preservation of these texts through millennia would make sense as efforts to maintain crucial historical information about prehistoric civilizations. The discovery would trigger worldwide archaeological investigations at sites that have produced anomalous evidence. Locations with unexplained megalithic construction, precision stonework, or advanced engineering features would receive renewed attention and funding. The search for additional evidence of prehistoric advanced civilizations would become a priority for researchers worldwide. The discovery would validate alternative archaeological approaches that have been marginalized by mainstream institutions. The paradigm shift would extend beyond archaeology into fields like anthropology, history, and evolutionary biology. The understanding of human cognitive development would require revision if advanced societies existed far earlier than expected. The relationship between technological capability and social complexity would need re-examination. The concept of cultural evolution would require modification to account for sophisticated prehistoric societies that developed and disappeared without leaving obvious traces. The verification of such extraordinary claims would represent more than archaeological discovery. It would demonstrate that human history contains mysteries that challenge our most basic assumptions about civilization, technology, and human development. The implications would ripple through every aspect of how we understand ourselves, our past, and our place in the long story of human achievement. Yet despite all these theoretical implications and heated debates, the controversy remains fundamentally unresolved. The extraordinary claims continue to face extraordinary skepticism, creating a standoff that may define how we approach revolutionary archaeological discoveries underground in the modern era. After months of heated debate, the underground city controversy remains locked in a fundamental stalemate between extraordinary claims and extraordinary skepticism. The Italian and Scottish research team continues to defend their radar findings, releasing additional technical details about their scanning methods and interpretations. They maintain that their synthetic aperture radar technology successfully mapped massive structures, extending thousands of feet beneath the Giza Plateau. Their confidence in these findings hasn't wavered despite fierce criticism from mainstream archaeology. The establishment's position has only hardened over time. Leading archaeologists and radar experts continue to reject the deep scanning claims as physically impossible, pointing to fundamental limitations in electromagnetic wave propagation through dense materials. Professor Lawrence Conyers and other technical experts maintain that no known radar technology can penetrate thousands of feet through limestone bedrock while providing the detailed structural information the team claims to have obtained. The scientific consensus remains that the entire underground city concept rests on flawed interpretation of meaningless radar data. The controversy generates intense debate because it touches on fundamental questions about scientific methodology, institutional authority, and the nature of archaeological discovery. The research team's claims challenge not just specific historical timelines, but the entire framework of evidence-based archaeology. Their assertions about ancient advanced civilizations contradict established understanding of human development during prehistoric periods. The implications extend far beyond simple archaeological discovery into questions about human capabilities, technological development, and the reliability of historical narratives. The intensity of the debate also reflects deeper tensions between traditional academic institutions and alternative researchers who claim mainstream archaeology suppresses revolutionary discoveries. The underground city controversy has become a lightning rod for broader disagreements about scientific authority, peer review processes, and the willingness of established institutions to consider evidence that challenges accepted paradigms. Both sides have invested significant credibility in their positions, making compromise or middle ground solutions increasingly unlikely. Definitively resolving these claims would require physical excavation at the specific coordinates where the team claims to have detected massive structures. A single test drilling operation reaching 600 feet below the surface would provide incontrovertible proof of the chamber's existence or absence. Core samples, photographs of carved surfaces, and analysis of construction techniques would provide the physical evidence necessary to validate or debunk the extraordinary claims. However, the practical requirements for such excavation remain formidable. The Egyptian government would need to approve permits for major drilling operations near the pyramids, a process that could take years and face significant resistance from conservation authorities. The cost would reach millions of dollars for proper archaeological excavation of multiple deep sites. The logistics of drilling through thousands of feet of limestone bedrock would require specialized equipment and experienced operators typically associated with mining or geothermal projects rather than archaeological investigations. The archaeological establishment's resistance to the underground city claims raises questions about institutional openness to paradigm-shifting discoveries. Critics argue that mainstream archaeology has become too conservative, automatically rejecting evidence that challenges established timelines and theories. The fierce opposition to the research team's findings might reflect protective instincts around institutional authority rather than objective scientific evaluation. Alternatively, the establishment's skepticism might represent appropriate scientific caution when evaluating extraordinary claims that lack proper evidence. The requirements for peer review, independent verification, and physical evidence exist to prevent speculation from being accepted as established fact. The research team's bypass of standard scientific protocols and their release of findings through media channels rather than peer-reviewed publications might justify the establishment's dismissive response. The extraordinary claims versus extraordinary evidence principle creates a circular problem in this controversy. The research team's claims are so extraordinary that they require exceptional evidence to gain acceptance. But the evidence they provide falls far short of what such claims demand. Their radar data and ancient text interpretations might suffice for modest archaeological discoveries, but they cannot support revolutionary claims about ancient advanced civilizations. The gap between the magnitude of their claims and the quality of their evidence makes resolution through existing evidence virtually impossible. Social media and public interest have complicated the scientific discourse surrounding these claims. The underground city story has generated massive online engagement, with millions of people following the controversy through YouTube videos, social media posts, and online forums. This public attention has created pressure on both sides to maintain their positions rather than engage in objective scientific evaluation. The research team benefits from public support that validates their work outside traditional academic channels, while the establishment faces pressure to defend institutional authority against popular alternative theories. The democratization of information through social media has allowed the research team to bypass traditional scientific gatekeepers and present their findings directly to public audiences. This approach has generated enthusiasm among people interested in alternative archaeology and ancient mysteries, but it has also contributed to the polarization of the debate. The public's fascination with revolutionary discoveries can overwhelm careful scientific evaluation, creating an environment where sensational claims receive more attention than rigorous analysis. Similar controversies in archaeology have typically been resolved through accumulation of additional evidence rather than dramatic single discoveries. The debate over the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin continues decades after initial claims because physical evidence remains inconclusive. The controversy over the age of the Sphinx has persisted for years because geological evidence can be interpreted in multiple ways. The underwater structures off the coast of Japan remain disputed because their artificial or natural origin cannot be definitively determined without more extensive investigation. The pattern of archaeological controversies suggests that the underground city debate might continue indefinitely without physical excavation or independent verification. Both sides can maintain their positions by pointing to different types of evidence and different standards of proof. The research team can continue citing radar data and ancient texts while dismissing establishment criticism as institutional resistance. The establishment can continue emphasizing the absence of physical evidence and proper scientific protocols while dismissing the team's findings as speculation. The core stalemate remains clear. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, which can only come from excavation or independent verification. The research team's findings deserve serious consideration, but they cannot be accepted as established fact without proper verification through peer-reviewed publication rather than media announcements. The establishment's criticism raises valid concerns about scientific methodology, but institutional resistance to revolutionary discoveries remains a legitimate concern. The ongoing mystery represents larger questions about human history, technological development, and the reliability of our understanding of the past. Whether the underground city exists or not, the debate reveals the limitations of current archaeological knowledge and the possibility that significant secrets remain hidden beneath the world's most famous ancient sites. The controversy forces us to examine our assumptions about what we think we know about human achievement and the mysteries that may still await discovery. The Giza Plateau continues to generate extraordinary claims that test the boundaries of archaeological science. This controversy reveals something profound about our relationship with the unknown past. We desperately want to believe that ancient civilizations possessed capabilities beyond what history books tell us, yet we demand extraordinary proof for extraordinary claims. The balance between healthy skepticism and closed-minded dismissal remains delicate. Perhaps the establishment protects scientific integrity, or perhaps it guards institutional authority too fiercely. Until we have physical evidence, this will remain a modern archaeological mystery that tests our standards for proof. The ancient world might hold secrets that challenge everything we think we know about civilization, technology, and human achievement throughout millennia.